Action cinema is the purest test of what film can do with time and space, the acceleration of consequence, the compression of physics into choreography, the arrangement of danger into something you can watch without breathing. From the grimy streets of 1980s Hollywood to the neon-lit dojos of Hong Kong, from Cold War bunkers to thundering desert highways, the action film has produced some of the most technically magnificent sequences in the history of cinema. These are not simply films that move fast. These are films that changed what movement in cinema means. Our picks for the 20 greatest action films ever made. Number 20, Speed, 1994. Jan de Bont's Speed is the high-concept action film in its most refined form. A premise so clean it fits in a single sentence. A bus cannot drop below 50 miles per hour, or it explodes. Keanu Reeves plays Jack Traven, an LAPD officer who must keep the bus moving through Los Angeles traffic, while a bomber, played by Dennis Hopper with gleeful menace, monitors everything from a safe distance. Sandra Bullock, drafted behind the wheel when the driver shot, gave a performance that launched a major career. The film has no ambition beyond its own mechanism, a mechanical problem wearing a thriller's clothing, and that self-awareness is its greatest asset. The flaws are real. The final act abandons the bus premise and loses its own best idea, and Hopper's villain tips into camp at precisely the wrong moments. But for 90 sustained minutes in the film's center, Speed achieves a kind of airless, claustrophobic tension that the action genre rarely manages to maintain at this pitch. It is the best possible version of a completely disposable premise, and that is a distinction worth acknowledging. Number 19, Lethal Weapon, 1987. Richard Donner's Lethal Weapon is the buddy cop film at its highest pitch. Two men who should not work together, who have nothing in common, who discover over the course of one very violent Christmas that each is exactly what the other needed. Mel Gibson's Martin Riggs is suicidal, reckless, and genuinely dangerous. Danny Glover's Roger Murtaugh is cautious, settled, and constitutionally opposed to the chaos Riggs generates. The friction between them is the film's engine, and Donner runs it with considerable skill. The action sequences, a sniper confrontation, a desert showdown, a final fight in the rain, are staged with a physicality that feels risky rather than choreographed. Gary Busey's antagonist is underwritten but menacing in the way only an actor working on pure instinct can manage. The franchise that followed coasted on diminishing returns across 3 sequels, but the original had something those sequels could never replicate: the genuine uncertainty of whether Riggs actually wanted to survive. That edge is what made Lethal Weapon more than entertainment. It made it compelling. Number 18, The Raid, 2011. Gareth Evans's The Raid is the action film stripped to its absolute minimum. A SWAT team enters a Jakarta apartment block controlled by a drug lord. The building locks down, and for 90 minutes, the only way out is through every floor of enemies above and below. There is no subtext. There is no ambiguity. There is, instead, the most sustained sequence of martial arts combat ever filmed in a single production. Iko Uwais, a practitioner of the Indonesian art of pencaksilat, performs sequences of such physical invention that the film functions as a showcase for a fighting tradition the world had largely not encountered. Evans understood that the corridor and the stairwell are the action genre's truest spaces, confined, unavoidable, nowhere to retreat. The plot exists to deposit bodies in those corridors. The film has been criticized for the thinness of its drama, and that criticism misses the point entirely. The Raid is not a film about human complexity. It is a film about what a human body can do at the absolute limit of its training, and it answers that question with staggering invention. Number 17, Enter the Dragon, 1973. Bruce Lee's final completed film is the crossover moment when martial arts became global cinema, the work that took a tradition the West had largely ignored and placed it at the center of a mainstream action thriller. Lee plays an agent infiltrating a criminal tournament on a private island, and the frame is classic genre mechanics. But the film around that frame is anything but conventional. Lee's on-screen presence is a phenomenon that defies straightforward analysis. a combination of physical perfection, psychological intensity, and an understanding of the camera that suggests someone who had been thinking about performance at a deep level for years. The tournament sequences build to a final confrontation in a hall of mirrors that remains one of the genre's most visually inventive set pieces. Enter the Dragon made Bruce Lee a legend, which is somewhat unfortunate. Legends are easier to worship than to understand. The film is not a monument to a man who died young. It is a document of what he could actually do. What he could do was unlike anything the action genre had produced before or has managed to replicate since. Number 16, First Blood, 1982. Ted Kotcheff's First Blood is the action film as Vietnam Parable, a story about what happens when a country creates soldiers and then has no use for them. Sylvester Stallone's John Rambo is a Green Beret drifting through small-town America, harassed by a local sheriff, who discovers too late that he has pushed someone trained for war into a corner where war is the only available response. The forest sequences, Rambo surviving alone against a manhunt, are staged with genuine tension and an awareness that the wilderness is as much a character as the men hunting through it. Brian Dennehy's Sheriff Teasel is the film's most valuable element, a man who is not a villain so much as a particular kind of American, one who confuses authority with legitimacy. Richard Crenna delivers the film's most important speech, explaining what Rambo is, with a quiet pride that functions as both warning and eulogy. The sequels turned Rambo into a cartoon. The original had something more considered in mind, an action film that was angry about what it depicted and unwilling to let the audience feel clean about enjoying it. Number 15, Mission Impossible Fallout, 2018. Christopher McQuarrie's Fallout is the culmination of what the Mission Impossible franchise became after it shed its television origins. An action series built around the single recurring question of what Tom Cruise is willing to do to his own body in the service of a set piece. The answer, by Fallout, is a great deal. The Halo jump sequence, filmed at real altitude, the Paris motorcycle chase conducted against oncoming traffic, the helicopter pursuit through a Himalayan canyon, each exists as a demonstration of practical stunt work at the outermost edge of what insurance companies and common sense will permit. Henry Cavill was cast partly because his forearms reload convincingly in a fight scene. That is the level of detail McQuarrie brought to every frame. Rebecca Ferguson's Ilsa Faust is the franchise's best addition in years, a character with actual agenda rather than function. Fallout understands that the action sequence is a language, and it speaks that language with a fluency that makes most of its contemporaries sound hesitant. The best pure action blockbuster the 2010s produced. Number 14, John Wick. Chapter 4, 2023. Chad Stahelski's fourth entry in the Keanu Reeves franchise is the point at which the series stopped pretending to be anything other than what it always was, a delivery mechanism for the most elaborately choreographed gun-fu sequences in American cinema. The Osaka Continental sequence, the Paris Arc de Triomphe car chase, filmed with a top-down God's eye view, the final ascent up the Sacré-Cœur staircase. Each set piece operates as a statement about the relationship between camera placement and combat choreography. Donnie Yen's blind assassin Kane is the film's richest invention, a man whose disability has become the foundation of his most lethal capabilities. The world building, at this stage in the franchise, risks collapsing under its own mythology. The high table has expanded past the point where any stakes feel real. But Stahelski and his stunt team have built something rare in contemporary action, a house style so distinctive that each film is immediately identifiable. Chapter 4 is that style operating without compromise, at the peak of its technical refinement, with no interest in excusing itself to anyone. Number 13, Hard Boiled, 1992. John Woo's Hard Boiled is the apotheosis of the Hong Kong action film. 2 hours of escalating set pieces that culminate in a hospital siege of such sustained choreographic invention that it functions less as cinema than as kinetic sculpture. Chow Yun-fat plays Inspector Tequila, a cop pursuing arms traffickers, and Tony Leung plays the undercover officer he encounters on the other side of the law. Their alliance inside the hospital, working through ward after ward of gunmen with a focused, almost mathematical precision, is the sequence the entire film exists to deliver. Woo's signature imagery, doves, slow motion, two-gun standoffs, operatic loyalty between men, reaches its fullest expression here, amplified to a pitch he would never quite sustain in his subsequent Hollywood work. The plot is thin. The performances are functional rather than layered. Neither matters, because Hard-Boiled is not asking to be judged on those terms. It asks only to be judged on what it does with a camera and a body in motion, and on those terms, it has never been surpassed. Number 12. Crouching Tiger Hidden Dragon, 2000. Ang Lee's Wuxia masterpiece arrived in Western markets as a revelation, a film that used the grammar of Chinese martial arts cinema to tell a story about duty, desire, and the cost of living according to other people's expectations rather than your own. Chow Yun-fat and Michelle Yeoh play warriors of an older generation, defined by codes they can no longer fully inhabit. Zhang Zi's Jen is the true center, a young woman who wants everything the code denies her and who is willing to destroy herself and others to obtain it. The fight sequences, on rooftops, across treetops, in a tea house, deploy wire work not as superhuman display, but as metaphor. These characters are literally too constrained by gravity to reach what they want. Tan Dun's score is among the most beautiful ever composed for an action film. Crouching Tiger Hidden Dragon won 4 Academy Awards. More importantly, it demonstrated that action choreography could carry the emotional weight of literary drama without condescension in either direction. A film of genuine, sustained beauty that the genre has not equaled since. Number 11. Ip Man, 2008. Wilson Yip's Ip Man is the martial arts biographical film at its most persuasive, a portrait of the Wing Chun grandmaster who trained Bruce Lee, set against the Japanese occupation of Foshan during the Second World War, that manages to be both historically grounded and cinematically operatic. Donnie Yen gives the defining performance of his career, a man of such physical mastery and personal restraint that his decision to fight, when it finally arrives, carries the weight of everything he has refused to do until that moment. The 10-men fight sequence, Ip Man against 10, Japanese black belts conducted with a focused, clinical efficiency, is among the finest pieces of martial arts choreography the genre has produced. The film's politics are compressed, as the genre demands. The emotional architecture is not. Ip Man's relationship with his wife, his reluctance to step outside his household into the public world of conflict, gives the action sequences a human cost that lifts them beyond display. One of the finest martial arts films ever made, and a worthy introduction to a practitioner the world deserved to know better. Number 10. The Bourne Ultimatum, 2007. Paul Greengrass's third Bourne film is the point at which the franchise's formal experiment, handheld immediacy, fragmented editing, the action sequence's psychological state rather than spectacle, reached its fullest expression. The Waterloo Station sequence, in which Jason Bourne navigates a crowded London terminus while simultaneously guiding a journalist through a surveillance net, is the finest action set piece of the 2000s. A chase, a chess match, and a portrait of a mind working at its absolute limit, all at once. Matt Damon's Bourne is the anti-Bond. No wit, no glamour, no distance from the violence. A man who knows what has been done to him and what he has done to others, and who carries both as weight rather than credential. Greengrass's camera never settles, and the unease that creates is the point. The Bourne Ultimatum redefined what mainstream action cinema could look and feel like, and the decade of imitations that followed could not capture what made it work, because the sense that every cut was a consequence rather than a choice cannot be replicated without the same commitment. Number 9. Casino Royale, 2006. Martin Campbell's Casino Royale performed a seemingly impossible task. It persuaded a global audience to discard 40 years of accumulated Bond mythology and accept a new actor, a new register, and a new set of rules within the first 10 minutes. Daniel Craig's Bond is stripped of the franchise's usual irony. This is a man who has just earned his license to kill, and has not yet learned to wear it as armor. The parkour opening sequence establishes the film's physical language. This Bond does not detonate wristwatches. He runs, bleeds, and refuses to stop. Eva Green's Vesper Lynd is the best Bond antagonist turned ally the franchise has produced. A woman who matches him intellectually, defeats him emotionally, and destroys him in the ways that matter most. The poker game at the film's center is an action sequence conducted in suits and silence, and Campbell shoots it with a tension most directors reserve for combat. Casino Royale made the Bond franchise worth caring about again. More than that, it demonstrated that the spy action film had dramatic possibilities it had spent 4 decades not bothering to pursue. Number 8. Kill Bill. Volume 1, 2003. Quentin Tarantino's first volume is an act of cinematic curation as much as original filmmaking. A distillation of every Japanese chambra film, every Hong Kong revenge picture, every Italian genre exercise he absorbed across years of obsessive watching, reassembled into something that is simultaneously homage and something new. Uma Thurman's bride wakes from a 4-year coma and begins working through the list of people who put her there, and each confrontation is staged in a different visual language. The crazy 88 battle, hundreds of enemies, blue lit, the blood rendered black and white by raiding necessity, limbs falling with a kind of abstract abundance, is the film's great formal statement. Violence as choreography so total, it crosses into the aesthetic. Sonny Chiba's swordmaker scene is, by contrast, almost meditative. The split from Volume 2, a decision made late in production, means this chapter ends without resolution. It is half a story. As half a story, it is among the most visually inventive action films ever made. The second half is quieter and deeper. This half is spectacle at its most controlled and unashamed. Number 7. Mad Max Fury Road 2015. George Miller spent 30 years preparing to make Fury Road, and the film carries that preparation in every frame. The quality of someone who has thought through each shot for longer than most directors have been working. The premise is a 2-hour car chase across a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and Miller executes it without deviation or apology. Tom Hardy's Max is largely a passenger in his own film. The narrative belongs to Charlize Theron's Imperator Furiosa, who is transporting 5 captive wives away from a warlord and whose physical and moral authority drives every decision. The practical stunt work, war boys on poles, a guitar fire truck, a desert sandstorm, was filmed on location in Namibia with a commitment to physical reality that no digital construction can replicate in texture. Miller shot the action at a slightly overcranked frame rate that gives the vehicular combat a quality unlike anything in contemporary action cinema. Fury Road won 6 Academy Awards. The most significant thing about it has no award category. It is the one recent action film that feels as though it was made by someone who knew, at a deep level, what the form was for. Number 6. Die Hard 1988. John McTiernan's Die Hard is the action film that others are measured against. Not because it was the first, but because it was the first to understand that confinement is a resource rather than a limitation. John McClane, a New York cop visiting his estranged wife in a Los Angeles skyscraper on Christmas Eve, is not an action hero in the traditional mold. He bleeds, he doubts, he runs out of shoes and makes poor decisions and wins through stubbornness and improvisation rather than invulnerability. Bruce Willis understood that the key was never letting McClane look comfortable. Alan Rickman's Hans Gruber is the genre's defining villain, educated, composed, operating with a planner's patience against someone who keeps disrupting the plan. The relationship between the two men, conducted almost entirely by radio before they meet, is the film's best structural invention. Die Hard has been imitated so extensively that the category of film it created has its own name. None of the imitations understood why the original worked. McClane was never supposed to be a hero. He was supposed to be the only person left in the building. That distinction was always the point. Number 5. Top Gun Maverick 2022. Joseph Kosinski's sequel to Tony Scott's 1986 original is the rarest thing in contemporary blockbuster cinema. A legacy sequel that does not coast on nostalgia, but earns its place by understanding what the original was actually about, and doing that thing better. Tom Cruise plays Pete Mitchell 36 years after the events of the first film, still a captain, still flying, still refusing the promotion that would remove him from a cockpit. The film's argument is that the best action cinema is built on physical consequence, that an audience's body responds differently to images of aircraft moving at those speeds than to digital constructions of the same speeds. Cruise spent 18 months training the cast to withstand G-forces sufficient to make camera operation inside the cockpit viable. The result is aerial photography that remains startling across repeated viewings. The screenplay, a recycled version of the original mission structure, is not the film's strength. Its strength is the sustained argument that craft, in the service of cinema and in the service of flying, is its own form of integrity. Top Gun Maverick made over $1.5 billion at the global box office. More surprisingly, it deserved every dollar. Number 4. Raiders of the Lost Ark, 1981. Steven Spielberg's Raiders is the adventure action film at its peak, a film so well constructed that it has been studied in film schools for 4 decades and still yields new lessons about how to choreograph desire, danger, and information simultaneously. Harrison Ford's Indiana Jones is the template for the capable but fallible action hero, a man who wins through intelligence and determination rather than invulnerability, who gets hurt, who loses, who improvises badly under pressure, and somehow comes through anyway. The opening temple sequence, the booby traps, the boulder, the pit of snakes, is a complete short film before the main title appears, establishing character, tone, and physical vocabulary in under 10 minutes, with a compression that remains the standard for the form. John Williams' score is the second most recognizable piece of action music ever written. The film's relationship to its source material, 1930s serial adventure, is affectionate without becoming ironic. Spielberg loves these stories, and that affection reaches the audience without condescension. Raiders of the Lost Ark is the action-adventure film in its most complete expression. Thrilling, funny, frightening in one sequence, and built with the kind of precision that looks effortless from the outside and is anything but. Number 3. Léon the Professional, 1994. Luc Besson's Léon is the action film with the most uncomfortable center of gravity on this list. A relationship between a 12-year-old girl, played by Natalie Portman in her debut, and a middle-aged professional killer, played by Jean Reno, that the film handles with more delicacy than many critics have been willing to credit. What Besson understood was that the action sequences are not the subject. They are the frame around the subject, which is two people who have been entirely alone in the world, finding in each other a reason to keep going. Reno's Léon is a man of near total emotional limitation. He drinks milk, tends a plant, kills people with methodical excellence. And Portman's Matilda, whose family has been murdered by a corrupt DEA agent, played by Gary Oldman, at his most terrifyingly unhinged, pulls him toward a world he has spent his life avoiding. Oldman's performance is among the most committed villain turns in action cinema, a man so severed from consequence that his violence has the quality of weather. The final sequence, Léon against an apartment building of law enforcement, is staged with intelligence that transforms it from spectacle into something closer to tragedy. Léon uses action as emotional language. That ambition is rarer than it should be. Number 2. The Matrix, 1999. The Wachowskis. The Matrix did not merely change action cinema. It altered the visual language of popular culture so thoroughly that the images it introduced became indistinguishable from the environment they were designed to critique. Bullet time, the 360-degree frozen moment, the slowed-down impact. These were technical innovations that became, within 18 months of the film's release, shorthand so ubiquitous they had to be retired from serious use. Keanu Reeves's Neo is the action hero the 1990s needed. Uncertain, chosen without his consent, learning to inhabit a power that initially makes no sense to him. Carrie-Anne Moss's Trinity and Lawrence Fishburne's Morpheus complete a trio whose dynamic is built on the tension between predestination and agency, a philosophical question the film never fully resolves, which is why it has generated 3 decades of debate. The lobby sequence, the rooftop helicopter extraction, the final corridor battle. Each set piece is a demonstration of what happens when choreography, philosophy, and technical invention operate simultaneously at their highest pitch. The sequels diluted what the original established. The original, seen again now, still carries the charge of something genuinely new, a film that divided everything before it from everything after. Number 1. Terminator 2, Judgment Day, 1991. James Cameron's sequel most completely solved the action genre's central problem: how to make a machine threatening when the audience already knows it can be defeated. The answer was to reverse the original film's moral architecture. The Terminator is now the protector, the T-800 assigned to keep John Connor alive against a new, more advanced threat. Robert Patrick's T-1000, made of liquid metal, capable of assuming any form, utterly silent in its pursuit, remains the most unsettling villain in action film history. Not because of what it does, but because of what it cannot do, which is stop. Edward Furlong's John Connor is given genuine interiority rather than existing as a prize to be protected. Linda Hamilton's return as Sarah Connor, transformed from survivor into something harder, more frightening, and considerably more tragic, is the performance the franchise never properly honored. The digital effects cost more than the original film's entire budget. The emotional achievement is less often discussed. Cameron built a film about a machine learning to protect something and found, inside that mechanism, something functioning as grief. That Terminator 2 sits above The Matrix on this list is a declaration. Action cinema at its fullest does not merely reconfigure the world's visual language. It makes you feel the weight of what winning costs. 20 films, one genre, and the arguments start immediately. Terminator 2 at number 1 is a declaration of intent. Action cinema can be both spectacle and genuine science fiction tragedy at once. The Matrix will top many lists, and that conversation is exactly the one worth having. Whether you came for Hong Kong choreography, American muscle, or the European menace of a man in a suit, action cinema has never wasted a decade. Tell us which film belongs at the top of your list.